The sky was burning red, and smoke covered the land. Explosions shook the ground as the alien girl ran across the battlefield. Her body tired, but her heart still fighting. She held a broken weapon in her hand, but she knew it would not help against the heavy fire raining from above. Her people were losing, and she could see their great cities turning into ruins. Her chest rose and fell as she breathed fast, her eyes wide with fear and anger. She had fought for so long, hoping that maybe there would be a chance of victory. But now, deep inside, she knew the truth. This was the end. The enemy was stronger, faster and more prepared, and the enemy was human. She stumbled into a trench, her knees shaking as dust and dirt filled her lungs. Screams echoed around her, and the sound of machines roared in her ears. She pressed her back against the cold wall of the trench, gripping her weapon tight. Her heart whispered one question: was this the moment she would die? A shadow passed above, followed by a rain of fire. The ground exploded, throwing her forward into the mud. Her ears rang and her vision blurred. She tasted blood on her lips, but she forced herself up. She had promised never to fall without a fight. All around her, her people were falling, their voices mixing with the sound of war. The sky lit up with flashes of light, each one closer than before. She looked to the horizon and saw the dark shapes of human war machines pushing forward. Step by step, the fear in her heart grew heavier, pressing down like chains. Still, she did not run. She had nowhere to run. Her family was gone. Her world was burning, and all she had left was her will. She raised her broken weapon, aiming at the shadows, even though she knew it was useless. She wanted to meet death standing, not crawling. Her eyes burned with tears as she whispered a final prayer to the stars, a prayer not for victory, but for peace. If her death could end her pain, maybe it was enough. She braced herself, closing her eyes as the sound of enemy fire grew louder. Her body trembled, but her heart was strangely calm. This was it, she thought. This was the last breath. The battlefield shook again, and she felt the hot air of another explosion. She waited for the pain, for the end, but it did not come. Instead, she felt a strange warmth wrapping around her. Strong arms pulled her from the dirt, holding her close. A voice, deep and human, whispered in her ear, "You're safe now." Her eyes shot open, confusion filling her mind. She should have been dead, but she was alive. She looked up, and for the first time she saw the face of her enemy, a human soldier, holding her as if she was something precious. The girl's lips parted, but no words came. Her heart pounded, not from fear of death, but from the shock of life. She had braced for death, but instead she had awakened in human arms, and nothing would ever be the same again. The alien girl opened her eyes slowly, her vision blurred and heavy. She expected fire, smoke, and the sound of war, but instead she heard silence broken only by the soft drip of water. Her body ached, but she was alive. That alone was a shock, because she remembered closing her eyes to meet death. She tried to move, but warm arms were still around her, holding her gently but firmly. Her heart raced because those arms were human, the very enemy she had sworn to fight until her last breath. Her eyes darted upward and met the face of a man, his skin pale from exhaustion, his uniform torn. His gaze was not cold or cruel, it was strangely calm, almost protective. The girl struggled, pushing against him weakly, but she had no strength left. He whispered, "Stay still, you're hurt." His voice low, steady, and human. The words confused her more than the battle itself. Why would he save her when he could have ended her life with ease? Her mind screamed that it was a trick. Her people had always told her that humans were merciless, that they only destroyed, but here was one, keeping her alive when he could have walked away. Her lips parted as she tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Only one word escaped, a whisper, "Why?" The human soldier glanced at her, his face unreadable. Then he answered softly, "Because you are still alive, and that is reason enough." His reply made no sense. And yet it echoed inside her heart. For the first time in her life, she saw an enemy as more than a monster. The man lifted her carefully and carried her through a narrow tunnel hidden beneath the ruins. The walls dripped with water. The air was cold, but the silence felt safe compared to the battlefield above. He walked with purpose, as if he had done this before. Finally, they reached a small underground chamber lit by weak lanterns. The girl blinked in shock. Inside the chamber were others, both aliens like her and humans like him. They were sitting side by side, wounded, weak, but alive. She had never imagined such a sight, enemies living together in secret, hiding from the very war they once fought. Her heart beat faster as she tried to understand. This place felt impossible, like a dream she did not trust. She looked at the human who had saved her, but he said nothing more. He simply laid her down on a thin bed of blankets and stepped back. His silence only made the questions in her mind grow heavier. The girl touched her chest, feeling her heart still racing. She should have been dead, yet she was breathing. She should have hated him, yet she could not forget the warmth of his arms. The war outside had taught her only fear, but now, in this hidden place, she felt something far more dangerous: hope. And as her eyes slowly closed, her last thought was not of her fallen people or the ruined sky. It was of the strange human soldier who had chosen to save her instead of killing her. Her story was no longer only about survival. It was about something she did not yet understand, but deep inside, she knew this moment was only the beginning. When the alien girl woke again, the sound of war was gone. Instead, she heard whispers, soft footsteps, and the faint crackle of fire. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light, and she realized she was in a place unlike any she had seen before. It was not a prison, not a battlefield, but something hidden, something forbidden. The room was carved out of stone, with walls rough and damp. Lanterns hung from hooks, their glow painting shadows that danced across the floor. The air was cool, filled with the smell of smoke and earth, and around her, figures moved quietly, speaking in low voices. She pushed herself up, her body still weak, and her eyes widened at the sight. Aliens, her own kind, sat together with humans, some wrapped in bandages, some leaning against the wall in silence. No one fought, no one raised weapons. For the first time in her life, she saw her people and their enemies sharing the same space without blood. Her heart pounded because it felt impossible. All her life, she had been told humans could not be trusted, that they destroyed everything they touched. Yet here they were, helping one another, passing food and water. It was not hatred in their eyes. It was exhaustion, pain, and something deeper, the will to survive. The human soldier who saved her appeared again, his shadow stretching across the chamber as he entered. He carried a small metal box and set it down beside her. Inside were medical tools, simple but useful. He knelt without a word and began cleaning the wound on her arm. The girl flinched, her instincts screaming at her to resist, but his touch was careful, steady, and she felt no cruelty in it. Her voice trembled as she finally asked, "What is this place?" The soldier's eyes lifted for a moment. Then he said quietly, "A refuge for those who want the war to end." The words struck her like a blade. Her people had fought for generations, and now here was a place where enemies gathered, not to kill, but to hide. She did not know whether to believe him or to fear him more. She scanned the room again and noticed a child sitting in the corner. The child's skin was human, but his eyes, bright and sharp, were alien. Her breath caught as she realized he was a hybrid. Proof of something unthinkable. Proof that walls between their kinds had already been broken. If her people saw this, they would call it betrayal. If the humans saw it, they might call it corruption. But here in the hidden refuge, the child was simply alive, her heart twisted with questions. Why had no one told her such a place could exist? Why was she saved when so many others were left to die? And most of all, why did the sight of a human sitting beside her people not fill her with rage, but with a strange, fragile hope? The soldier finished binding her wound and stood up, his eyes calm but unreadable. "You should rest," he said, his voice carrying the weight of something he did not explain. She wanted to ask more, but exhaustion pulled her back into silence. As she lay down again, her thoughts tangled like threads of fire and smoke. Above them, the war raged on, tearing the world apart, but in this underground chamber, something else was growing, something her people had never taught her to believe in. A secret stronger than fear, a hidden truth more dangerous than any weapon, the possibility of peace. Days passed in the hidden refuge, and the alien girl's strength slowly returned. At first, she stayed silent, watching everything with cautious eyes. She saw humans giving food to her people, and aliens sharing water with humans. It felt strange, unnatural, yet every day it became harder to deny. The war above was cruel, but down here, survival had no side. The human soldier who saved her often stayed close. He never spoke much, but his presence was steady, like a shield that never moved. She tried to avoid him, telling herself he was still the enemy, but her eyes always found him in the crowd. She noticed the way his hands shook when he thought no one was watching. She noticed the scars on his arms, old wounds that told stories he would not speak. One evening, while the others slept, she found herself sitting near the fire. The soldier sat across from her, sharpening a broken blade. The silence between them was heavy, but it was not hostile. It was the silence of two souls who carried the same weight. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain, as she finally asked, "Why did you save me?" The soldier's hand froze on the blade, his eyes lifting slowly to hers. For a moment, he said nothing, and she wondered if he would refuse to answer. Then he spoke, his words quiet but sharp. "Because I am tired of watching everything die." The girl's heart trembled at the honesty in his voice. No hatred, no lies, only a truth she had never heard from an enemy. Her people had always said humans fought for greed, for power, for destruction, but here was one who fought simply to keep someone alive. Even if that someone was his enemy, that night she could not sleep. His words echoed inside her like a storm she could not silence. When her eyes closed, she remembered his arms pulling her from the fire. When her eyes opened, she saw his shadow sitting near the tunnel entrance, keeping watch. For the first time since the war began, she felt safer with a human than with her own kind. The next day, danger struck the refuge. A tunnel collapsed nearby, and dust filled the chamber. Panic spread, cries filled the air, and the wounded struggled to breathe. The girl stumbled in the chaos, her body still weak, but the soldier's hand caught hers, pulling her through the smoke. His grip was firm, unshakable, as if he would not let her go no matter what. When they reached safety, her chest burned with more than just the dust. She realized something had changed inside her. This bond, fragile but growing, was not built from blood or orders. It was born in the fire of survival, in the quiet moments of trust. And though she did not want to admit it, the enemy she once feared was slowly becoming the only person she trusted. But deep inside, fear still lived. She knew if her people discovered her feelings, they would call her a traitor. And if the humans discovered his kindness, they might call him a coward. Their bond was dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than the war itself. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she no longer saw an enemy. She saw a man who carried the same scars, the same pain, and perhaps the same hope. The nights in the refuge were always heavy with silence. But one night, the silence broke. It began as a faint hum, so soft most did not notice. Then the ground trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. The alien girl opened her eyes sharply, her instincts screaming something was moving in the tunnels. And it was not human. The others stirred, fear spreading quickly among them. Children began to cry. Wounded ones pressed themselves against the walls. The girl turned her head and saw the human soldier already on his feet. His weapon raised, his eyes locked on the darkness ahead. He did not speak, but the tension in his stance told her everything. Danger was coming. From the shadows, a shape appeared, cold and metallic. Its red eyes glowed like burning coals, scanning. The chamber with hunger. It was not a soldier, not a man. It was one of the war machines, designed to hunt, designed to kill. The girl's breath caught. Because she knew these machines never left survivors. The creature of metal moved closer, its steps heavy and sharp against the stone. The humans and aliens froze, too weak to fight, too tired to run. The girl's heart pounded, fear clawing at her chest, but before she could move, the soldier's hand grabbed hers again, pulling her behind a broken wall. His voice was firm but low. "Stay close." The machine advanced, its scanners sweeping across the chamber. Every second felt like fire in her veins. She wanted to fight, but her broken weapon was useless. The soldier, however, crouched low, waiting for the perfect moment. She watched him, his body steady as stone, his eyes never blinking, and for the first time, she realized he was not just protecting her, he was protecting everyone. The machine struck suddenly, a beam of light cutting across the room, screams filled the chamber, and panic exploded. The soldier leapt from cover, firing at the machine. Sparks flying in the dark, the girl's body moved on its own. Grabbing a fallen piece of metal, her heart screamed that she could not just hide. Not anymore. Together, they attacked human and alien side by side. The machine swung its arm, striking the wall, sending stone crashing down. Dust blinded her, but she pushed forward, jabbing the sharp metal into its joint. The soldier's shots hit its glowing eye, the sparks bursting like fire in the night. The machine staggered, sparks raining across the floor. Then, with one final strike, it collapsed. The echo of its fall shaking the chamber, silence returned, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. The others stared in disbelief. An alien and a human had fought together and survived. The girl looked at the soldier, her chest heaving, her arms trembling. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was no war, no sides, only the bond of two who had faced death together. But in the quiet that followed, she realized something even darker. If one machine had found them, more would. Come, the refuge was no longer safe. Their secret place in the dark was discovered, and the only way to survive now was to keep fighting. Side by side, the fallen machine still lay in the chamber, sparks fading into silence. Its broken body was proof that the refuge had been discovered. Fear spread quickly, and whispers filled the air. The wounded asked if more machines would come. The children clung to their mothers. The alien girl stood among them, her heart heavy with the truth she could no longer escape. They could not stay here, not anymore. The tunnels were no longer safe. The humans in the group spoke of leaving, of finding another hidden place. But the aliens whispered something else, returning to their own people, reporting what they had seen. To them, fighting side by side with humans was a sin. They would call it betrayal, and betrayal was punished by death. The girl felt their eyes on her. They expected her to speak, to choose her people. Her body shook, because deep inside she wanted to believe them. But when she turned her head, she saw the human soldier standing quietly at the edge of the chamber. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something she had not seen before: trust. Her thoughts tangled like chains around her chest. If she chose her people, she could walk away, she could survive. That meant leaving him, the one who had carried her from death, the one who had fought beside her without hesitation. If she chose him, she would be marked a traitor, her name cursed forever. It was a choice no one should make, but it was. Hers and hers alone. That night, she sat by the dim fire, staring at the flames. Her hands trembled as she remembered his words. Because you are still alive, and that is reason enough. Why would a human say such a thing? Why would he risk everything for her? Her people would never understand, but her heart already did. The soldier walked over and sat beside her, his silence steady. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, "When the machines come again, you must decide where you stand." His words struck her harder than any weapon because she knew he was right. The war above was not ending, and soon it would reach them again. Her eyes burned as she whispered, "If I stand with you, I lose everything." The soldier looked into the fire, his face unreadable. Then he answered, "If you stand against me, you lose yourself." The weight of his words crushed her, but also lit something inside her. All her life, she had been told who the enemy was, told what to believe, told how to fight, but no one had ever given her a choice until now, the choice to see with her own eyes, to follow her own heart. When she lay down that night, she knew sleep would not come. Her mind replayed the battle, the warmth of his arms, the bond they had forged in silence. Her people's voices screamed in her memory, calling her weak, calling her a traitor, but her heart whispered something else. A truth she could not ignore. She no longer feared the human. She feared losing him. As dawn broke through the cracks in the stone ceiling, she rose to her feet. Her choice was made. It would cost her everything she once knew, but it would give her something greater. Not just survival, but hope. And when the soldier's eyes met hers that morning, she gave a single nod, silent, steady, final. She had chosen, and there was no turning back. The morning came with no warning. The ground shook, the walls cracked, and the tunnels filled with a metallic roar. The machines had returned, this time not one but many. Their red eyes cut through the darkness, their steps echoing like drums of death. The refuge was no longer a secret, it was a trap. Panic spread, voices cried out, and the wounded scrambled for safety. The alien girl stood frozen for a breath, her choice burning in her chest. Her people shouted for her to run with them, to escape into the deeper tunnels, but her eyes locked on the human soldier who stood firm at the entrance, weapon raised. He did not run, he did not hide. He faced the storm, even if it meant dying. Her legs moved before her mind could stop. Then she rushed to his side, her broken weapon clutched in her hands. The soldier glanced at her, surprise flashing in his eyes, but she gave no words, only a nod. And in that moment, he understood she had chosen him. The machines charged, beams of fire slicing through stone. The chamber shook as rubble rained from above. Together they fought, their movements desperate but united. The soldier's shots tore into metal. The girl's strikes hit weak points with precision, each time one machine fell, two more appeared, but they did not stop. Because stopping meant death, screams echoed behind them as humans and aliens fled. The child with alien eyes and human skin was carried away, his small voice crying in the chaos. The girl's heart tightened at the sight. That child was proof of a future her people denied, and she knew she was fighting not just for survival, but for that fragile future. The battle raged until smoke filled the air and fire lit the stone. The soldier stumbled, a wound burning across his side. For a moment, fear clutched her heart. She caught him before he fell, her arms now holding him just as his had once held her. Her voice shook as she whispered, "You saved me, now I will save you." With the last of her strength, she dragged him through a collapsing passage. The machines roared behind them, but the tunnel crumbled, sealing their path. Dust and silence swallowed the air, and when the echoes faded, there was only the two of them. Gasping in the faint light of the surface above, they emerged into a broken world, the sky painted with fire and smoke. Yet the wind felt different, clean, free. The girl helped him to his feet, their bodies weak but still standing. They looked at the burning horizon, knowing the war was far from over. but something inside them had already changed. She turned to him, her voice low but steady. "I braced for death, but I woke in your arms." The soldier met her gaze, pain in his face but hope in his eyes. Neither of them spoke after that, because words were no longer needed. Side by side, they walked into the unknown, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something new to lives bound together by choice, by trust, and by the possibility of a dawn their world had never seen.